All right, guys, welcome back. I am joined by our first doctor on the show, Dr. Reuben Montenegro. I'm going to mess it up. Montemagni? Montemagni.
That's it. There you go.
Montemagni.
That's
Got
it.
it.
Good.
All right, cool. um, Dr. Reuben is the easy way I remember it.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it. He has a practice out in San Diego. He's a chiropractor, and I wanted to have him on for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's always a pleasure going in to see him, and you know, um, it's chiropractic work from my experience has kind of always gotten I guess, a negative reputation, let's say, or at least in my experience. And, it was just by doing a Google search. Let me back up a little. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm too excited already for the interview.
Right on. Right
So I was dealing with a neck injury from jujitsu, and this neck injury was lasted probably 4 to 6 months that I was like in and out of jujitsu, like was not training how I wanted to. I had gone to so bad that like my neck knotted up. I went to went to the ER, and they were like just gave me muscle relaxers. My physician like put me in touch with like a physical therapist. I did that for like a month and a half. Didn't help at all. I then went and got some acupuncture, which I kind of had to, bribe essentially my doctor to do. Not literally bribe, but let's say beg. He barely passed me on acupuncture. And then, that didn't work. The next thing he says is, okay, well, we're going to have to get you in here to do an MRI. And in my mind, I'm like, shit, man, like clearly he has no idea what's going on. So like, what am I going to do? And from whatever sparked my interest, it was like, maybe you should check out chiropractic work. And I remember having that thought, and my first thought was like, no, people like die, or people always get killed by like that kind of stuff. And and so I decided to do some research, and that wasn't the case, as I very quickly found out. Um, and so I even remember, I did a Google search, found the best, maybe the best. I found the best in my opinion, but I found a
Thank you.
chiropractor, Dr. Reuben, in PB. And I remember sitting down for the first time we met, and I even was like, yeah, like, I've stayed away from this just from pure ignorance. And, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about like what's going on with my neck and what's happening. And Dr. Rubin did an excellent job of explaining, the way the spinal cord works, the way that, your nerve endings sit kind of on top of each other, and, what happens whenever they get out of misalignment. And so we took some x-rays, he did an adjustment, and I felt better instantly. And, from there, it was only really like, I guess like 5 to 10 minute conversations we had, because, he's a busy guy. He's got other people he needs to help. And so I'm honored and thrilled to be able to sit down with him for an extended period of time, and so we can dig deeper on some of the basic conversations that we've been having. So, Dr. Rubin, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, I always like to start with like, how did you kind of figure out, where that you wanted to be a doctor, and that you wanted to be a doctor of chiropractic? Because in my belief system, I think a lot of people struggle to really become in tune with what they want to do. In my personal experience, I believe we're kind of pressured almost. We're kind of, told at a young age, you got to go to college. After college, you got to get a job. After you get a job, you have to get a wife. After you get a wife, you have to get a house. You have to have kids. You have to go and die,
Pretty much in that order.
Yeah, in that order.
Yeah.
And so I'm always curious about, I think the hardest part for people is they get forced into selecting a degree, and that degree is basically going to be with a job you do for the next, 40 some majority of your years, essentially. So what was, I guess, what was your journey like with being a chiropractor? Let's start with, did you always want to be one?
That's a great question. I mean, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's what we always hear. And, how does a child know what the heck they want to be in an ever-changing world? So, like for myself, when people first asked me that, I remember I was real little, and the first thing I said, I want to be a ninja. And they said, oh, you can't be a ninja? And those are real. I said, okay. I never really believed them, and we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But after that, like you said, you get pressured into it. So I was, what do I want to be? I should be something that makes money. I should be something that I enjoy. There's so many different things. Chiropractic was absolutely not in the purview, right? It was nowhere near anything about me. I came from a big family of immigrants, Italian, and that was certainly not part of their world. If it was healthcare, It was a medical doctor, the top doctor. You got to be the top doctor, right? And so that was something I was not interested in, but I assumed I should pursue. I mean, I've always been interested. I've always been a sensitive person. I've been very empathetic. I thought it was weird when I was a kid that I didn't laugh when others got hurt. And later in my life, I found out that's probably a good thing. Else you'd be a doctor, right? So, first, so I thought, maybe I'd be a medical doctor. And then, as I went through school and stuff, I realized I really didn't want to do that. That was not a passion. When I graduated from college, I became I was a musician before I graduated from college. So I was a musician for a long time. I toured. I played guitar in the 90s. We were really cool.
Yeah. Did you have like a band and everything?
Oh, yeah, we had a band. We toured with other bands,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so, and I guess because of NDAs, I can't say names, so I won't. Especially since this is a podcast. But,
all right.
But I spent some good time in my youth doing that. And that was a big passion for me. But I'd always been interested in healthcare. It's just not Western medicine. I had also grown up doing a lot of martial arts, especially the Chinese area of martial arts, kung fu, all different aspects. I grew up in the Bay Area, so we had a very strong Cantonese community. I think I've mentioned that to you. And I grew up doing Tai Chi, Bagua, kung fu, all different kinds of stuff. And through doing that, I learned their way, that old traditional way of the Southern Chinese community, how they looked at the world, how they interacted, and everything they believe for martial arts, they believe for healthcare. There's the balance, there's qi, there's yin and yang, there's all these different elements that you take into consideration, not just for your life, but say you were a doctor or you're a martial artist, whatever it is, right? You're an accountant. Mm-hmm. So that always kind of stuck with me, and I used Chinese medicine as my primary healthcare choice from the age of about 14 when I could actually make a choice. And that was kind of my primary. And then I became a musician. I toured the world. I still use Chinese medicine for myself, but always very interested in always reading books, learning more. And then eventually that kind of petered down, probably because I had too much fun as a young man playing music.
We were all there, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Realized that probably wasn't good for my health over the long term. And I went back to school. And when I went back to school, I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do, right? So I started taking some sciences. I did some classical archaeology, thought that would be cool. I tried some different things. And then I finally kind of focused on healthcare. I became a paramedic after I got my bachelor's because I needed to make some money to go back and do more. So I was a paramedic for San Francisco Fire Department for a long time. And then for a couple of years, I should say, it was a long time to me. Let's see what else I do. I did some professor work in some of the colleges in the Bay Area as I got back into my master's, teacher's assistant, and then I was working in that arena while still doing some EMT and paramedic work. And then eventually I said, hey, I should just go to school and do this Chinese medicine thing, which has always been a big part of my life and a big part of my philosophy, Taoism, all that stuff. And so I did. And as I was doing that, I forgot to mention, I also had been practicing judo and jiu-jitsu since I was about 12, more competitively. The kung fu was more just my spiritual, what I loved. The other thing was like, let's get physical, let's get some aggression out. Mm-hmm. And I had become proficient and pretty good, in my own estimation. And I was competing a lot. And so I started going to Chinese medicine school. I was, hitting my apex with judo competitions and going around the world and that kind of stuff. And then at some point I got hurt real bad, horrible tear in my left knee, ACL tear. And this was probably tear number 5 or so because I had torn it a few other times. All martial artists, we have patterns. My knee. And then, I healed from that slowly. I never went and saw a medical doctor. I always did yoga. I did Chinese medicine. And then after a couple more tears after that, continuing through Chinese medicine school, rehabbing, and then going back and competing, at about the eighth tear, I know, at the eighth tear, I was like,
Jeez.
yeah, I can't do this anymore. I'm 26. I'm walking around with a cane. My wife was just like, hey man, I can't hear you whine anymore. Go see the chiropractor. Because just like you had heard, I thought they were, devil winged killers bent on global, conquest. So I had no idea. I was like, oh, they're crazy. But, I was at the end of my rope. I had nothing else.
Right.
Like, it's got to work. So I'm going to go try it. Right? Because I don't want surgery. That was the one thing I didn't want. And so I finally made it to the chiropractor. She found me a really great guy that she had known because my wife had worked in chiropractic for many years, running the businesses and stuff. So I was familiar with many of them. So I went to one guy and went in there on my little cane. He was this big Italian dude, little table. It was just kind of funny. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. Made me feel at ease. Explained it, much like I explained it to you. I was like, that makes actually total sense. That's pretty, straightforward. Okay, let's do it. Gets me on the table, and then he gives me this big ass neck adjustment, just boom. And I remember I was just like, I popped up off the table. I couldn't see anything. It was just kind of white. I could breathe all of a sudden, like, I was just a human lung, and like, I could see.
You were alive.
Yeah, I was alive. Like I could see God, but I jumped off the table, and I was like, what the hell did you do? And he's like, yeah, it was pretty good, right? I was like, I guess so. He's like, but look, you're standing, and you're not using your cane. Just from that one first adjustment at the top of C1.
Jeez.
I was like, oh my God. And literally I had hobbled in there. I could put no pressure on it. And I was standing on it. And my knees were bent. I was like, let's go, right? And I was like,
right.
Wow. And he's like, yeah, get back on the table. Let's finish it off. So finish the adjustment. I felt better, just kind of like you. It was like almost instant. And obviously I wasn't back to fighting for him. It took a few months, but I mean, the speed, that I convalesced and rehabilitated and improved over the next couple of months meant that I got back onto that mat and I was competing again. And it was mind blowing. I kept going.
Right.
I was consistent.
It
It changed my life. And from that moment, I was like, wow, I'm in the wrong school. I got to go to chiropractic school. Not that Chinese medicine was bad or anything. Right. Just for me, how I interact with people, it was a perfect blend of, being a ninja and being able to help people with your ninja skills all in one. And you're a doctor. I mean, it was perfect.
Knocking all this, you get the family, you get what you want, you got the ninja,
right?
You got everything.
Yeah, so
so
that was it.
That's a wild story. There's a lot to break down in that story too. Yeah.
Go for it, man.
Just laid it all out there. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Damn, now I'm kind of like lost on where to kind of go at first. So, geez.
Take your time.
Maybe I should have cut you off whenever the thoughts started coming up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Feel free.
Yeah. So let's see here. Let me try to run back through it in my head.
Okay.
So when you're a kid, you wanted to be a ninja,
yep.
And I mean, let's start there. So it sounds like you kind of were able to pull that off with all the different like martial arts you were doing. You were kind of going through, it sounded like karate. So how many martial arts were you doing at this time when you were about like 14? It sounds like there's quite a few.
So 14, I was competing in judo and jiu-jitsu. So I was doing that. I had been doing, I believe officially it would be 8 trigram bagua. I had been doing that since I was about 6. I had done a stint in Kempo for maybe a year while doing that because there was a little crossover between the two schools who were next to each other. So I started learning a little bit of that. And I had also been doing some sword forms for it's called Swimming Dragon Tai Chi. It was a lineage practice specific to that area. The family was up there. And I've been doing that since I was about 11 or 12. So a couple of years for that. So sword, bagua, judo, and jiu-jitsu were the primary things that I were doing at that time.
So was there like a movie or like some icon you had that was like oh, like ninjas are the way, like this is what I need to do? And then how did you kind of break that down into like, well, these are the arts? I mean, I guess the sword fighting one kind of makes sense.
Right.
But how'd you kind of break down that the other things were, how you're going to become a real life, let's say ninja per se?
That's a great one. So when I was a really young kid, I watched Bruce Lee, right? And like for so many of us Westerners, this guy comes on doing things that, you've never seen anybody do. And to this day, I don't know if there's anybody who's been faster. I mean, let's do the test. But it totally blew my mind. Like the way he moved, I was mesmerized by his movements, by his calm. And yes, he was acting, but, I had also seen him. I'd seen footage of him, doing martial arts exhibitions, in the Bay Area and Seattle as well. And my father around that time had bought me a book, and I forget what it was called. It was this big, one of those big table books. And it was a lot of pictures, but it was like the secrets of the East, of the Orient, some really non-PC description of it. But within that book, all of a sudden I'm introduced to, all these different philosophies in Japan and China, and, just little snippets of history, how old it is, and then snippets of different martial art forms, and then snippets of ninjas, what they were used for, right? And how they were involved with samurai, and how they were used all over the world, or at least the Eastern world at that time. And so I started really getting a feel for this whole world at that time. And then, just being a product of being a young man in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 70s and 80s, I had a lot of friends who were Cantonese, and a lot of friends who were Japanese, and a lot of friends who were Vietnamese, and a lot of friends who were Filipino. And I was constantly exposed. And because I then started to have that interest in it, I was like, hey, when you do that with the Bali song and the butterfly knives, how do you do that? And they'd start showing me. And then when I was more interested, it'd be like, you know what, I don't know anymore, but you can ask my uncle, you can ask my cousin, or, my brother's teacher, so that's how I started with all like the more Chinese style martial arts, the Kung Fu. And then after that, I wanted to get a bit more combative, and a friend of mine was taking judo. And I thought, hey, let's, to be a ninja, I need to know more. So.
Yeah. You gotta be able to grab people.
Yeah, you gotta be able to grab
people. So a couple of interesting things. Number one, it's cool how you kind of like started asking people questions, and that kind of opened the door to like, it's like the way I see it. And I'm kind of bringing this up because in other episodes, it's kind of worked this way where it's like, you ask the one person, right, your friend, it's like, how do you do that stuff with a knife? And they show you, and you're like, okay, I need more. Yeah. And it's like, they might not have it. And so then just your curiosity just takes you down this rabbit hole. And then they just kind of can open up everything kind of to you. Like, well, I learned it from this person, so go talk to him. It's like, okay, well, go talk to this guy. It's like, you go down this like maze of just everything just kind of unfolding in front of you.
Yeah. And, you have to ask. We were talking with the staff this morning at our chiropractic office, and we were talking about obsession, right? The motivation doesn't last, passion wanes, but obsession is forever. So what you're obsessed with about, you will find it. And I, usually if you really want to know, you're going to have to ask at some point. And if you don't ask, you're not that obsessed.
And so then is a good way to say it, like, it's kind of just finding the thing that you want to ask the most questions about. Like, would that be like kind of what aligned you with chiropractic work? Like, you just wanted to add, like, you couldn't stop asking questions about chiropractic work. Like, well, why are you doing this to my neck? Did it fix my knee? Well, how does this work with that? Is that kind of like how chiropractic work found you?
100%. It was just, I wanted to know more. I've always been a curious person. I understand not everybody, is cat curious, but I consider myself cat curious. If I'm really interested, I will just keep asking. And if there are no answers, I'll try to find them my own way. But I mean, that's exactly what I did. I kept asking. I kept wanting to know more. And the cool thing with it was the more I asked and the more I learned, the more there was to learn. And a new level of perception is open, and you're like, oh, wow, I can think that way and it's good. Well, then, and it works. So then you start following down more rabbit holes. And, another really interesting thing I thought about it too, is I started getting into chiropractic, because after you get to a certain level in traditional, Japanese judo, you start learning how to reset the bones you're dislocating. You start learning how to put your friends and mentors, teachers and students back together. That,
That's wild.
which was always a very interesting thing to me in Japanese and Chinese martial arts, is that once you get to a certain level, now you take the same skill and you apply it for a different purpose. And so chiropractic was like this Western martial art. And it blew my mind in that sense. I think that's what kept me really obsessed with it and keeps me obsessed to this day.
Yeah, that parallel is pretty wild. Let's take a step back. I thought of this question earlier. What is, I guess, and maybe this is a region thing. I really don't know the answer here, but what's the difference between like a ninja and a samurai? Is it cultural, or is it like the ninjas were more like special ops samurais, or what when you were reading that book on your coffee table, what were like the key distinctions between like a ninja and a samurai?
That's a great question. I mean, there's so much that I don't know about it, but I can tell you what I do know about it, what I think I know. And if anybody out there, sees I'm saying something wrong, please correct me.
Yeah.
So samurai was not only the sword carrying knights that we think of, or we correlate with the West, but they were also a class, right? A class ruling people, or the people who helped the rulers rule. They kept their own versions of order. They, think of a feudal system, right? Castles, knights, and peasants, and whatever. So the samurais were the knights, and samurais had a very specific code by which they lived. Honor, Bushido is the code, honor and social status, and how you spoke and how you bowed and how the tone you spoke at based on the person's social status. That was all intermixed with the samurai culture. And within the samurai culture as well, you were expected to fight for your master, right? Your lord, whatever you want to call it. And to do so, you wanted all your people, because this wasn't 100,000 warriors. This was 10 or 20 or 40 or maybe a few hundred, right, when it first started.
So a few hundred samurais for like one.
Yeah, for one lord or one fiefdom or one area. So you didn't have as many people, so you had to have more skill. Again, same correlation with Western Europe, just different cultural standards and modes of operation. So each one of those samurai had to be as skilled as they could in every different aspect. So they learned everything they could about shooting an arrow, shooting it standing still, kneeling down in the middle of combat, while running, on a horse, upside down on a horse, backwards on a horse, where you shoot it when a guy's charging at you with a bunch of armor, where you shoot at it, if somebody's running lightly and all these different things. And then that applies to swords, long range, short range, mid range. Which sword do you use? Which weapon do you use? Hand-to-hand combat, all this stuff. So they had to be trained in all aspects, and there was also a certain code of conduct expected. So that's the samurai, right? The ninja, on the other hand, or shinobi, I think they're more appropriately called in Japan, they were more of, I think, like a spy network. They were trained in very specific ways of gathering information. So, all the stealthiness and the climbing walls with the little, hand things, and ropes and rappelling. They were trained to do really crazy feats of strength, right? So, you had to hide from people who were standing and talking. You didn't want them to know that you were in the middle of their courtyard listening to the conversations. Somehow you have to be underwater for 10 minutes. Ninja were more, they were cross-trained just like samurai, but they were held to a different code of conduct. They were also not acceptable in society. So it wasn't cool to be a ninja. You were an outcast usually. And there were specific clans wherein if you were born into the clan, that's how you became a ninja. It's not an application, So was it like secretive? Or did you not want people to know you were a ninja then? Yes, because the whole point is secrecy, spying. Of course, right? Yeah. Assassination, if you're in the CIA or the FBI, you don't tell people you're in the CIA or the FBI. Exactly. Hey, what do you do? I'm a spy. Oh, yeah. Let me take down your number. So it reminds me
It reminds me of Archer. I don't know if you've ever seen it,
Yes,
but
Archer.
it's a cartoon show. I love whenever he'll introduce himself. He's like, "I'm Sterling Archer, the best spy in the world," and then people are like, "That can't be the the way you like introduce yourself."
I love that show. Yeah, so yeah, basically like that. And over time, the ninja or shinobi their clans gained a lot of power. There was infighting between them and the samurai class, and then eventually they were co-opted by the ruling powers, the daimyo. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's a whole nother topic. So it's just the way it was structured.
Is it a dynasty?
Kind of like a warlord that has a specific area that they take care of.
Okay. Okay.
And then ninja were used by the samurai to fight each other because they got to a point where you couldn't, kind of like politics. You don't want to just go kill everyone because you want to use them to make money. So the ninja go do their little secret stuff, and then each one uses them, and they were eventually phased out. Who knows how they're used and how they've morphed into modern society and all that other stuff, because nothing really ever goes away. It just changes form.
Right. Right.
Eventually, they were kind of taken off the board in terms of a force to be reckoned with as a whole, because they were dangerous, and you can't control dangerous things that easy. So you try to mitigate it. So the big difference was just where they sat in society, how they were accepted or not accepted, and one was basically the police and the military, and those of respect and honor, and the other ones were highly dangerous, feared, and used for secrecy and assassination and stuff.
And they were both used, I guess, by, would it be the ruler, whoever the ruler was of these certain areas at the time?
Yes, in varying periods, more or less, depending on what was going on in the political arena.
Gotcha. Yeah. How you wanted to use your power at the time, which one was more important to you, if you're more secretive or more, what is it? Walk with a heavy stick mentality.
Exactly. If you're more, in the open or secretive. And, over time too, because their skills were so amazing, and there's a lot of crossover between China, old China as a place of human occupation is one of the oldest places on the planet. Right. And some of the oldest continuous culture. And, ninjas come from there. There's a whole group of people there that, it's kind of like the baseline, and that mixed with the native peoples of Japan, who are actually of a more Caucasian background, which is really interesting. They're called the Ainu. They're the natives, and they had a very specific way of fighting, which was very ninja-like, and it morphed into this very unique thing at a unique period of time in a unique place to be what we conceive of. Yeah, so it's always interesting to me.
So then, I guess I always kind of associated samurais with Japan, but it sounds like ninjas were also Japan then, and then China, did they have their own form of samurais or ninjas, or were they just completely different? I guess. Yeah,
they did, because Japan had been isolationist for such a long time. They're an island, and they're not a big island. Right? It's like the size of California, out in the middle of the ocean. They kept it that way. So all the Chinese influence combined with the Ainu people and the Korean influences that came over, it formed a very specific society, what we know as modern Japan. And they're very structured, and they're kind of the epitome of what we see in the West is like, all of these structured, and everything is done this way. There's an art for everything, the art of folding your socks, the art of stirring your tea, and it's it's the same thing in China. It's just not, I don't know how to put it, because there's so many more people and they touch so many other cultures and countries. It's not as rigid. So you can find a correlative for everything that goes on there. But it's just not called the same thing. So yes, there were the version of samurai in China, all over the place in different forms under different names, but they did the same services. They were the form of ninja. They were the form of healers. It was just, it wasn't as
that's kind of expanded. Yeah. Because now I want to kind of, let's take this transition kind of into jiu-jitsu, because from my knowledge, let me see how to kind of phrase this, right? Because it seems like a lot of the martial arts and a lot of the, whether it's hand to hand, whether it's grappling, whether it's, swords or arrows, it seems like most of it started in Asia and then kind of spread from there, because and the reason I'm saying this is because I know that the story of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is it started in Japan as well. And I believe it was more judo based. I'm not sure how much of it was ground fighting at the time, but a guy by the name of Mieda, ended up landing in Rio de Janeiro, met the, wow, I can't believe I'm forgetting their name.
Okay, I'll forget everybody's name today.
I'm going to get demoted.
No, you got this.
The Gracies, the Gracie family. He meets the Gracies, and they're smaller, which right now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, Asians on average are kind of small already. So I'm kind of not sure how that happened. But then so then I guess they kind of perfected judo for the ground almost. Does that sound right to you?
Well, yes, that's a very apt and succinct breakdown of it. So what I do know about Japanese martial arts is there was a great exodus of martial artists from Japan, and everybody who had learned from Kano, the father of judo. And in Japanese martial arts, there's not really a lot of differentiation between judo and jiu-jitsu. If you're on the ground, they call it jiu-jitsu. If you're on standing, it's judo, right? Judo is more specific for competition purposes, but it's all within the same thing, right?
Yeah, the rule set kind of changes, but it's essentially the same movements, the same, positions, right? Points are just awarded differently.
Exactly. And so there was a mandate for all martial artists leaving Japan, go and spread this. It's about money. It's about spreading our culture. And our culture is what's the word? It's boiled down to this, and if people can understand this and the respect and the love of life and all the other stuff that it shows you what it's really about, not just about fighting, they will love, they will be exposed to something greater than themselves, and they will understand us a little bit better. And that's
so fascinating. I'm going to cut you off real quick because in my mind, I'm thinking about how, there's always this, it's so fascinating because I'm relating it back to England, and what England decided to share with everyone was Christianity, but they decided to go about it by a more forceful route per se than what you're hearing with, Japanese, because the Japanese that like martial arts, like there's a thing that happens, and I can attest to this only with jiu-jitsu, but I'm sure it happens with all of them, is once you come to this like level of understanding your body and body awareness and, understanding how to fight, it's like you become calmer, like you become more peaceful with the people around you, with life, and you become like this oneness thing almost.
It is a path to Zen. It is a path to that nirvana. Yoga is a physical practice to get you to, that place of spiritual, perfection, and always living in the moment with the great, whatever animates us, right? Mm-hmm. Yoga was taken to China, became Shaolin Kung Fu, what we know of now today, and that was taken to Japan to become judo, and jiu-jitsu was then taken to Brazil to mix with, Western wrestling and boxing and figure out a way to, you know what I mean? It's just the same passing of the same thing, and each culture and group is going to add their little flavors and their little flares to it. But, ultimately anybody that masters that, they master the inside,
Right.
You have to master the outside because we're in these physical bodies, but it's ultimately to master that inside. At least,
right. It's like it goes, Well, no, I mean it does. It goes back to the idea of like your internal world or your outer world is a reflection of your inner world, kind of thing. If you want to be like in this physical, flowy state of being able to move your body in these dynamic and effective ways. I mean, your inner body, the soul needs to be kind of sorted out, and you need to figure out these things of, either why you get frustrated about this or that, or, you felt this emotion here and there. And so if you're not able to kind of deal with those, then you're gonna, your ego almost kind of takes over, and then it kind of, it becomes muddied. You realize where you're losing that Zen or how you're able to gain it back quicker. And so I find it just fascinating that Japan, and I think you were about to say something else because I cut you off whenever you were talking about how Japan just wanted to kind of go and spread this influence of Zen throughout, the world.
Yeah, and I can't speak for the whole nation, but as a group, those who had achieved that level of mastery in that place, I can only assume or hypothesize that, it's a closed environment. It's mostly cold except for Okinawa, which tends to be a little normal, and that's the bottom south tip. How do we keep this alive in a place that at that point was breaking it down and making it more and more illegal to be that, right? You have to take it to people. You have to take it farther out. You have to give it to more people and let them make the choice.
Are
Right?
you saying it was
And
more legal in Japan?
it was, so there was something called the Meiji Restoration where Japan industrialized
Okay.
at the same time period as the West, right? When we were making
Okay.
guns, they were making guns. When we were making cars, they were making cars. I mean, it was hand in hand. Same with China,
Right.
but this is the Japanese, explanation. And when they did that, they were trying to get rid of the samurai class. That was the whole point of it. You know that movie with Tom Cruise
Huh.
where the white guy is the last samurai. Uh,
I
I
mean,
think,
yeah, I've seen pieces
yeah,
of
I
it.
think it's
Yeah.
called The Last Samurai. It's
Yeah.
a good
Yeah.
movie. That's fun. But basically, I mean, that movie was about the end of the samurai culture in Japan as it was, and as we know it and
Okay.
as we look at it. And, when the new modern industrialization machine came out and they consolidated all the power, they've been doing that for a few hundred years. And now the one government took care of everything, and Japan was now going to be modern. So by doing that, they outlawed the samurai culture. They then split up and they either became
Interesting.
yakuza. That is one branch of the old samurai lineages. It's the yakuza, or they call them kiretsu. They turned into the modern corporations. One or the other, they both have power different ways, right?
Right.
But all of that to say that the samurai traditions of passing on and living that kind of martial arts, the Zen and spiritual lifestyle, that was outlawed. And so those who had been
Oh.
given that gift and passed down through those family lineages could not advertise it. They could not,
Oh.
like you said in the beginning when I was talking, it's only who you knew. So if you knew, Mr. Kano,
Right.
Sensei Kano, you could learn judo and jujitsu and literally learn all this stuff that had been passed on for hundreds of years of samurai culture, because he knew it all, right? Not just that, he just perfected that
Right.
to give to others. This is the,
So what?
this is what I can give you. So
Yeah. So what was the idea though? Been behind? Was this my thought is my conspiracy that hat getting put on is
yeah,
my thought is this is a play of government in order to control people. Is that essentially why they got rid of these martial arts? You're giving me that look like.
come on, yeah, of
Yeah.
course it is. I mean, a government's job, a government is a corporation, whether it's an autocracy, a democracy, a republic, communism. Their only job is to control people because their only income is the control of people. So my answer would be
Right.
yes to that every time.
Okay, so then essentially what we have here is that the government needed to find a way to, because they're never satisfied with the amount of power they have. They always want to have a little bit more. It's always a little bit more power. And so
And samurai
what it
are
sounds like
dangerous
happened.
too. I mean, people that have that kind of thing, they're kind of dangerous to what you're trying to create because they can stand up to you.
Well, so then this is interesting, right? Because if the samurais and let's say the ninjas, they have all of the skills that are necessary, how do the people at the top convince them that they need to stop doing what they're doing? Like, how does that? Do you know?
Yeah, so it wasn't that they convinced them; they had to fight them down and kill most of them off, or co-opt those remaining who weren't willing to die for it, right? Um,
But if they were, okay, so here's where I'm confused because if they were the fighters, how were they able to kind of kill them if they were the fighters of?
So eventually, money and industrialization created globalization, created money, and money had always been around, but now money was accessible to everyone, not just the samurai. So all of a sudden, you have peasants, and he starts buying up everybody's farm. All of a sudden, he's a baller. He's got enough money to hire a bunch of people to protect his farm. So you get more and more of these people. You get more of that wealth share, and then all of a sudden, they're like, well, these guys, they're used to being able to walk around and cut our heads off, literally, if they want to see how sharp their swords are, or take your wife away and your concubine. That sucks. I don't want that, and I can't fight them. I'm not trained that way. I haven't lived my whole life doing that. So eventually, they all get together. They start talking, kind of like that version of Facebook, whatever it is. And then that's kind of how it was. It was basically it turned out into those with power, the ruling class, those with money, samurai. Versus the people had finally gotten enough power, consolidated, communicated enough, like any revolution, to be like, no more.
Right.
We now have guns, so that negates the majority of your swords and stuff. So that's how it was, and there was just more of them than the other.
Which is so crazy to me, right? Because, and I guess I can't really speak to saying for sure, but I'm heavily positive, right? How, if you're on the samurai side of this, right, you're never going to just go out and just kill people randomly, right? Because if you've mastered your body and you've mastered the idea of Zen, in theory, right? In theory, if you've mastered the art of Zen, there's no like need for you to just kind of go. Maybe you should ask this: are they just going out and just killing people at random? Is that a part of what was happening?
Yeah, unfortunately. So there's always two sides to all stories.
Sure.
The apex, the best you could be at that would be to be what we're talking about, and those were the people who eventually spread it, throughout the world. But
the top of the top,
or the calm of the calm, or the best who had the most calm. But as you know, take a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
There's what we call the mob mentality. The majority of them are, unfortunately, they're going to get together, they're going to thump their chest, and they're going to beat up the small one. And,
right.
Once you then understand,
and I mean, any group gets so big, there's going to be bad apples, even there.
100%.
And then that gets amplified.
Yes, and the samurai's job was to kill. They were
right.
I mean, literally with swords, and I don't know how it ever got to that point, but they could do that. There's historical data and evidence that was done on the regular at certain points in certain places. Now, all the time, everywhere? No, absolutely not. But yeah, unfortunately, their atrocities always, when people can kill
enough bad apples. Yeah, enough bad apples, decided to just start killing, and that encouraged, let's say, the people who didn't have the ability to fend for themselves to be afraid of them, and therefore they needed to flip the regime, essentially.
Exactly.
Flip the nature of what they had.
Exactly. French Revolution, Spartacus, I mean, same thing. You push it to the breaking point, and it worked out for them there.
And so then that, I guess, encouraged the people that were at the top of the martial arts hierarchy in Japan to say, okay, this is dying here. You guys need to go find a new country and spread this to them.
Yeah.
Is that, and so one of those, I guess, leaves of that happening was Maeda going down to Brazil. And so I guess we have that. Are there other popular examples that you're aware of where that has happened?
I'm going to forget the names, but
I know it's a challenging question.
Yeah. So the same thing happened going to France. France produces some of the world's best judo players. I mean, it's just amazing. I forget the guy that went there, but he went there specifically to do that. He's like, look at these big white people that love this. They're going to be amazing. And it's just, it flourished there because it was a perfect blend of, hey, this fits into the cultural, the way, the culture thinks. It speaks to the physicality of the population and what people like to do. So there was that one. And, it spread to a lot of different places. What happened in Brazil, I think, was more rare because Maeda went down there with that intention. But something about the Gracie family, something about that original group of people that learned it, saw something more, saw something in the future. It wasn't like, this is cool and it's just going to happen. There was vision there. There was obsession there. And again, if you look at a lot of the, jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu specifically, you can see a lot of Western wrestling, traditional Western wrestling woven in at specific parts. Japanese jiu-jitsu is to finish. There is no rolling around. Oh, that's good. Try this. No, it's I need to kill you because I got 13 other people coming up on me. That's where it ends.
Right.
That's why it's not a big sport in Japan, because it's deadly. It's survival art. Whereas they were like, God, look at all these cool things we can do. It'd be great just to get better. Just, keep doing it. Keep making flows out of it. Make it fun. Mm-hmm. Make it so that, she can do it and my kids can do it and they can do it. And that's why it's so unique, and it's so unique in the world. They had this vision of something so much greater, and it became that.
It's like there's so many different ways to do one thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really interesting to me, right? And maybe this is just a level of, my upbringing of ignorance, or, me not being exposed to it, right? Like, in America, I feel like the big thing is like wrestling, right? Or WWE. Like, you have wrestling in high school and whatnot, but I guess like a part of me doesn't view it as a martial art. Like, is it fair to call wrestling a martial art or no?
It's fair to call Greco-Roman wrestling a martial art, because originally when that was practiced by the Greeks and the Romans and, people surrounding the Mediterranean, actually it goes back even farther than that, but we'll get to that later. It was training for when they donned their armor and they went out and they fought each other for land or whatever they fought each other for. Same with boxing, right? It was very specific, and
boxing is big too.
fists were down here for a lot of reasons, one of which you got a shit ton of armor. And so all of a sudden you find yourself bladeless and shieldless, and people are coming at you. You got to be able to strike with that really unwieldy armor that was set up for you to hold spears, shields, and swords, right? So it was all created as a martial art, and then as Europe unified under the Romans' harsh rule, you know, it became more like what just military people practiced. And then everywhere else, it became more like, oh, let's make sport. Let's make more competition.
Gotcha.
Right? Did I answer the question? I think I went off on a tangent on that.
Yeah, a little bit. It sounds like you got it, right? So the question was, is wrestling a martial art? Maybe a better question is like, what identifies a martial art? Like, is it with the intent to kill? Is that kind of like because I know with wrestling, there's not really any submissions. It's just pin them on the ground in certain positions long enough. And it's not like if you wrestle somebody, they're never going to be able to submit you really, because they're never taught submissions. It's just how to get to a dominant position.
Right. Well, first of all, I do know, and I've kind of, it's kind of been a study of mine. Like I do know in Turkey and Romania, they still teach Greco-Roman wrestling like they did to the Roman soldiers, or at least that's what they say. And when you watch some of that stuff, and it's rare that you can find anything on it, it's like, whoa, I never saw a finish. I've never seen a finish in it. In like high school wrestling, not like that. I'm like, wow,
you're right.
That's intense. Okay, I get it. Okay, so yeah.
All right.
But then in like to speak to a martial art, I don't know. You got to look at both of those words. Why are you learning it? Are you learning it for martial purposes or for artistic purposes? Why do most people learn Aikido? Probably not to go kick ass and take names. Probably more to be self-confident and to be artistic and more flowy, right?
Right.
I could be wrong. I've never really done much with Aikido. I don't know. But, versus like judo or jiu-jitsu, where you have to rank, to improve, to move up the chain, you have to go interact with people and test your skills, right? That would be more martial, I would assume, and then eventually it becomes art. I think it's a blend. I know like what I practice now, and with the Filipino martial arts and stuff, and I'm probably getting ahead, and we can go back to it later, but they don't even call it martial art.
Keep going.
They just call it a survival art because it's taught only to survive. So you don't practice the end results. You can do flows, but you can never do the finish because there's always a blade or something in your hand, right? You
got to stop at some point, right?
Yeah.
If it's not to finish, right? And so let's jump off on that tangent, because I think I remember you, and correct me if I'm wrong, this was the martial art where I believe in the Philippines that they actually still use this to today to settle land disputes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you able to go into a little bit more detail than that? Like, because it sounded pretty brutal whenever you were talking about it.
Yeah, it's getting more traction in the West. You can find a lot about it on YouTube and stuff. Kali is what they call it in the Philippines. And it's a kind of an overarching word for martial arts practiced, in Southeast Asia. And delving deeper into it, first of all, I didn't realize it, but it's thousands of years old. This isn't a new iteration by any means, starting with the Indian empires who conquered all those areas, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Spanish really made them have to use it well. But yes, it's still used to settle land disputes in the country. 2 men, 2 blades, or however many blades, depending on their art and what they're comfortable with, and whoever's left standing, or who is wounded too much to fight. That there's a winner and a loser, and then person keeps their land or not. I mean, it's literally done like that, and yes, it's fascinating. And
I think it's so fascinating because we live in such, and I'm going to just speak for at least American perspective. It's like we live in such a, I don't want to say sheltered, but in such a reality where it's like, this stuff doesn't really happen. Like, it's like, what do you mean people fight, like kill each other over land? It's like, that still happens today. Mm-hmm. It's like, to me, it's like so bizarre. It's like, I don't know if it's a symptom of the fact that Americans, and as American, we're so far ahead, like, but I don't even know what I mean by so far ahead. It feels like it's like lawyers almost. It's like lawyers versus the fighting. I don't really know how to describe that. It's almost like we turn to the law, the books on the law, as opposed to just like, let's say Oh, I'm getting some bad thunderstorms here.
Here,
Not sure
it's
if those are
cool.
coming through. Are you gonna hear it?
Yeah, it's cool.
All right, cool. Well, maybe we'll roll with
Yeah,
it.
roll with it, man. I like
uh,
it.
um, and so add some more emphasis to the voice.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I just find it so fascinating how, like, in American society, I'm speaking for, we kind of just talk to, or we kind of just like we kind of rely just on the law to take care of things for us,
Mm-hmm.
almost, as opposed to just taking our life in our own hands.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's a good analogy for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, think about it too. Like in America, and at first it happened. You have a bunch of Westerners and Western Europeans coming over here. They all basically live under the same types of rulership, have the same expectations from culture and governance. So they can all they have a common register and language they can speak, whether it's financial, actual language, whatever it is, and the same expectations. They come here and they have to exterminate the majority of the population. So that was done. And, they did an amazingly horrible job of doing it, but they did it to 90 percentile. And then who's left? Right? Who's left is the common culture, that common Western European culture, the common values, the common rules that govern those cultures. So then there's no more need for that because it has no meaning under that cultural and governmental and value system that everybody shares to some degree or another. So no longer is it acceptable to fight and kill each other for it, right? Once the original atrocity is done. In the Philippines, it's different, right? In many countries, it's different. There's not that strong of a rule of governance. However, all those people still live under the same relatively similar traditional culture, precepts, rules of intertribal governance, rules of communication, expectation for those rules and those outcomes. So it makes total sense that a government so far away with almost no power in your area is not going to help you with the land dispute. They don't even, who knows if it's even registered in Manila. So, they use the old way. And that old way is used in a lot of different places. I mean, in Sicily, they use shotguns. I know that from family stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
To settle land disputes.
I still use that. I use it, in the sticks in Italy. It's still like that.
Really?
Yeah. And I can say that because of my background and everything, and I know, and I hear things still. I'm like, oh crap, really? Okay.
Damn.
So there they just use blades because there's a whole system of honor, and maybe they don't have access to guns, although I doubt that. But there's a whole thing.
It's the honor thing, right? It comes back to the culture and what your culture stands for, and kind of how that kind of finds its way throughout, the throughout the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So this was, first of all, this was a crazy rabbit hole going martial arts.
Hey man,
who knew a chiropractor could be so knowledgeable about it?
Right.
But let's circle back then to the chiropractic work, because I was thinking about this the other day. Sleeping, something we do 8 hours a day, arguably a third of our entire life we're asleep for. So, and then there's days you wake up, it's like, oh, I slept on my neck wrong, I slept wrong, I did this wrong, and then it will wear on you for the next couple of days. Right. So it's in all of our best interests, per se, to be sleeping optimally. And, I thought about this as an engineering approach. I thought, okay, what all contributes to sleeping? And I figure it comes down to, and we're just basically speaking from a skeleton point of view, right? It would be the firmness, let's say, of the mattress or the whatever you're sleeping on. It would be if you're using a pillow, and then if you're sleeping on your stomach, back, or side. I feel like those would be like the three things that would be contribute to your sleeping position.
Yes.
So, as a chiropractor, what would you say your recommendations are for those three things?
All right. So let me just say this first. So, you're right. We spend about a third of our life sleeping, or we should. Sleep is for the healing, right? You know that. We've talked about it. If you don't sleep, you're not healing. If you're not healing, you're never going to catch up with all the injuries you're consistently doing with your body, and it will eventually fail. So sleep is absolutely important. And then the nature of sleep. How deep is that sleep? Because you need to be in deep beta, delta levels of REM sleep in order to gain those really deep healing cycles and effects. So in order to get that, there are some optimal positions, although I will add a caveat at the end. So firstly, mattresses, right? Everybody's a little bit different. Size, density, training, age, gender, you name it, right? So many different factors. So a medium to higher firm mattress is usually going to be the better one. If someone has some severe various autoimmune arthropathies, swelling, inflammatory diseases, stuff like that, then a softer mattress can be better because there's less pressure per square, whatever amount of space, inch or whatever. But usually medium to more firm mattresses are better because they give support, and support is necessary. And then in terms of a pillow, it doesn't matter what pillow you use, you just got to support your neck. It's not about supporting your head. You have to support the neck. Because if you're supporting your head, your neck is going to be bent into whatever, wherever the gravity is going, right? And that's going to jack your neck up overnight. So it's always about the support for the neck. Let's see there. Yes, the pillow. Oh, and position. Optimal positions are always on your back or your sides. That way you can maintain the curvature in your neck if you're on your back. And even on the side, you're not putting any undue forward or backwards, anterior, posterior strain on the neck, right? So as long as you keep it at that right, height, depending on your shoulder, that's going to be good. So back or side is the best way. And if you're on your side, you want to make sure the pillow is mostly under your neck, and you want to make sure it's about as wide as your shoulder. So your neck can maintain that straightness with the rest of the spine, right?
Right.
Now, all that being said, your body, once you fall asleep, once you lose that consciousness, it's going to put you in whatever position it wants you in. And whatever position it puts you in is the position that takes the most pressure off the central nervous system. So if you're sleeping on your stomach and you're all twisted, because of the injuries and how you move and your functional movement patterns that you've accrued in your life up to that point, that actually is probably the best way to sleep for your nervous system. Doesn't mean you're going to feel good in the morning. Doesn't mean your neck isn't jacked. So, in order to change that, you got to work on the alignment, chiropractic, whatever, stretching and everything else people do. And then it can start to change. But always remember, for everybody out there who watches this, your body puts you in whatever it needs you to be in when you're unconscious. You don't have a say.
So there's no control over that.
Yeah, there's no control over that. But it always does behoove you to, use the best mattress. Organic is great. You want organic because things made out of plastic and made cheaply, that they have formaldehyde in it. They have glyceraldehydes. They have benzene rings that leak overnight. Basically a bunch of cancer and carcinogen causing materials that will basically aerosolize, and then you breathe it in, and over time that's bad.
Okay.
You want it medium to firm, right? Somewhere in there based on your comfort. And if you can sleep on your back or your side, that's how you always want to at least start. We'll see where you end up.
Can't control the morning.
Can't control that, and make sure the neck is supported. Those are the three best things you can do.
So then here's a big question that for my personal interest, I started sleeping without a pillow just because I felt like it was, I don't know, maybe better. I remember you showing me like the curvature of the neck and kind of how it's supposed to be curved. And I guess I somehow thought that maybe like if I didn't have it, I could naturally like put my neck there. Is it, I mean, I hate to use the term better or worse, but, is it more or less, does it matter? Is it more or less ideal if I still use a pillow and try to get it more like to my shoulder or to my trap?
Well, let me ask you this. You waking up comfortable? Do you feel rested? Does your neck hurt?
I mean, yeah, but that's for different reasons.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Yeah. You know what I would recommend for you is just one of those. I don't think I have one in here. Those little, like, they call them cervical pillows. They look like a little roll, but you don't want the kind that's stiff. It's in Korea they fill them with like the seeds of wheat or wheat chaff or whatever, but it's non-allergenic. It's not that, but it's like that. They fill it with something like that, and so it's moldable. It's small. Okay. You can throw it in your backpack, and I always travel with either that or a towel, or I at least roll up a shirt for under my neck. I think it's better for that support, knowing you and taking, working with you and everything, for you, I would definitely
cervical pillow.
Yeah. So again, roll up a towel or something. Have something a little supportive under the neck. All right.
A towel.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I like that idea.
that's easy, especially if you don't need a big pillow and you don't, if you don't want it, you don't like it, it's not comfortable. You absolutely don't need it.
Well, I mean, I guess just my opinion is it's not really. I mean, I guess I'm comfortable either way. It's more of just getting my neck into that optimal alignment such that, it's healing appropriately. It's able to like kind of do all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess I'll look into the cervical pillow and like kind of roll up a towel to kind of get underneath there.
And if you need to just hit me up and I'll send you a link to the one that I use. Another chiropractor makes it. A friend of mine. I don't know where it is in the world right now.
A chiropractor official.
Yeah,
one.
It's a chiropractor official, but it's one you don't have to order from Korea. It's made here in the United States.
Yeah. I also found it really fascinating. You were talking about, and this might be a little, I guess, gross for people, but illicit. This is your warning.
Right.
I remember you were telling me about how it's related to bowel movements, and you're saying how like sometimes people come in and see you and get like their back cracked and everything,
mm-hmm.
and it's the only time they go home. It's the only time they actually have like a decent bowel movement is after you go in and like readjust,
mm-hmm.
People.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this is kind of a weird way to kind of go off, but this also flashed in my head.
Okay.
Is I remember seeing like you see videos, and this is what really I was like, okay, this is bullshit. Like this is all fake. Was you would see like either like old grandmas or something like be waddling up to kind of like a table, like in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of like downtown somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And a guy would like be a chiropractor and he would do all this work.
Mm-hmm.
And then she would get off the table and she'd be walking fine, like nothing, like she was like in the best shape of her life. And
right.
You see another old person like limp over to the table and then he like works them off and then they get up and it's just like they're 20 years old again.
Right.
I guess in your experience, A, have you seen those videos, and B, or is that like legit? Like, is that legitimately how therapeutic it is?
No. I mean, in my experience, no. I've never adjusted someone who is, 80 plus and they have gotten up and been, skipping around like they're in their 20s. Have people, stood up straighter? Yes. Have they been able to breathe better? Yes. Have they gone and taken a big poop and gotten rid of a bunch of toxins? Absolutely. Getting rid of headaches? Sure. I mean, so many things, yes. But that kind of drama, no. I think maybe it might happen once or twice in a year over billions of adjustments throughout the world, maybe. I mean, I totally allow the possibility. I've never seen it. And from what I know, how the human body works, physiology, all that stuff, adaptation cycles, I highly, highly doubt it. And, let's be honest, every field on the planet, for every career, there's those that are a little more honest, those that like the hype. So, right. Maybe, hey, grandma, I know you just ran that marathon, but can you come over here and just kind of shuffle over and I'll adjust you and then you'll sprint home. So, I mean, I'm not going to say no, it's impossible. Maybe that was 100% true, but I mean, I haven't experienced that. Have I experienced great things? Yes. But most of the time it takes, if someone's going to get that much better, it takes a little bit of time and effort and repetition.
Takes a couple months.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It takes a couple months.
Takes a couple months to be able to pull it off.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess then what maybe like how, I don't want to phrase it as maybe it is a miracle. What would be like kind of the closest thing to like a miracle, or like what are the craziest kind of things you've seen personally where you've adjusted somebody and, I don't know if, they just sit upright or if like they're just hunched over like crazy and it fixes their posture, because I mean, these things all like counteract. So, I mean, I guess it's kind of hard to say like, one adjustment can do so much. Yeah.
I mean, I think I get what you're saying. I mean, some of the best things I've seen, some of the miracles I've seen are just, it seems super simple, but imagine not pooping for weeks, right? I mean, I've never been a constipated kind of person. Sorry for everybody out there. It's just not me. I go the other way if it goes to that, right? But I couldn't imagine not being able to release all those toxins, because that's all toxic waste. Literally, your toxic waste. Your body has gleaned everything it needs out of it, and the rest it can't use. It needs gone, but it sits in there. And I mean, this is a major cause of a lot of bowel cancer, right? And some of the best things I've seen is a big adjustment down in that sacrum, pelvis, L5, all the way up to L1. And the person's, oh my God, I feel so. And then they're like, oh, and they run over to the bathroom. And, half an hour later, they're leaving the office like, wow, I haven't pooped for, a couple of weeks. That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Wow.
I've had, let's see, I can't say that one because then I'll get the medics all over my ass. So I don't want to say that one. So I'll say a different one. Headaches. Somebody comes in, chronic migraines, just chronic, like 10 years worth of just horrible migraines. They expect it from Friday to Sunday, and they have to lay in a dark room with a towel over their head. Their marriage is going to hell. Their work sucks. They can't spend time with their kids. This is a case. Come in and, they're going through a horrible migraine right then. Do a little icing, get them down, give those, really great adjustments specific at the atlas and then down through that cervical spine, let them rest. And 10 minutes later, they come out of the room like, I don't have a headache. I don't remember when I haven't had a headache. I can't remember it.
Right.
It's just like, oh my God.
It's like foreign.
Yeah. And obviously you still got to work at it to maintain that progress, right? And allow it to become part of the new pattern, the positive pattern. But it's mostly things like that. Sprained ankles.
Right.
People, can't put any pressure on the ankle or knees, like my story.
Right.
Boom, get that ankle back in, adjust C1, get the knee back in, adjust C1 in the pelvis. And then all of a sudden they literally walk out of the office, which is, I love that stuff. I love watching people heal and smile. There's not a lot of people smile about just, internally in the world right now. It's a crazy place. And I like to see people do that because then they take it out there and they pass it on. Yeah,
it's that ripple effect, right? It's once it's kind of like healing, like physically or even spiritually, I guess. Like you start healing, you start to see that ripple effect in your life of everyone else around you starts like feeling that and like vibing off of it. I mean, you lose some people, maybe you lose some people across the way who aren't ready for it, but there's enough people that start like feeling it and seeing it that it like just starts like breeding off onto them.
Exactly. And
it kind of touches.
Yeah. And you can't change everyone with everything all the time, right? It's just, you got to be in the right place to be receptive to it. But eventually if you're negative and you're surrounded by positivity, you will eventually become positive. And the reverse situation is true. Right. So, just do our work.
That's the whole, like, you're the accumulation of the 5 people you spend the most time with, it's so, I don't know, like something about that just seems so wild to me. Like there's a level of like, you're in control, but you're not in control kind of at the same time. Like you get to pick the 5 people around you, but at the same time, it's like, well, like there's that kind of corollary, that back and forth of, how much control do you really have over who you are, No,
it's huge. I mean, you have to understand what allows you to have the control in order to get the control. You don't just control something because you want to. You need to.
Yeah.
You need to cultivate the skills, like with anything, like martial arts, chiropractic, I don't know, accounting, doing law, whatever it is.
It's a whole, you start opening up like the rabbit hole of things that are occurring, right? You just start kind of progressing down it. And one thing that so a story I've brought up now on 2 different podcasts would have been on episode 2, I brought it up. And then on the episode 6, I brought up as well, was the story about blueberries and healing my acne. When I brought it to you, I brought the story up, and for those who haven't heard those ones, I, was at some point in my spiritual journey where I was introduced to the chakra system, and I'm sure we've all heard it at some level, but I started to play around with it in terms of food. Like, red fruit would be at your root, sacral, orange food would be at your sacral, then yellow, green, blue, purple, and white all the way up. Your throat being your blue chakra, your throat chakra, represented by the color blue. I was having acne along the side of my neck, and I basically was like, let's see how true that this, whole thing is. I decided to add some blueberries to my diet. And I think over the course of like 2 or 3 days, I probably ate a couple hundred blueberries. Like it was something obnoxious. And lo and behold, my acne started to clear up, and I thought it was absolutely insane. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, how the hell is this like happening?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember bringing it to you, and you kind of just sat there and smiled, and you're just like, yeah, that's how it works. Like it was something you've already kind of like seen and been through in your life.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I mean, yeah, all these, what do they call them? Traditional cures and stuff, that now in our society we consider like, oh, that's the weird stuff. Well, if it's weird, why has it been around since literally cavemen have been painting in caves? Why was that always the go-to, but all of a sudden it's, you can't use blueberries. You got to take 18 cycles of doxycycline and make sure, okay, you could do that and it'll probably get rid of it. How good it is for the rest of your organs and tissues, I don't know. We'll see later. But blueberries, well, shit. If it doesn't work, at least you got a bunch of blueberry nutrients in it, right? And most of these conditions are a deficiency. It's either one of two things. You have too much or too little of something. That's it. All diseases are broken down into that. I don't care what it is. Pick one. You have too much or too little. And, a lot of times, especially with acne, it can be associated with it can be, not all the time. Everybody out there, calm down. It can be associated with the gland.
Cover your bases.
Yeah, right. Blueberries. It can be associated with the gland. That's also associated with the chakra, because all chakras are associated with the gland. That gland is going to be the thyroid. Thyroid needs a very specific mineral. One of those minerals is found in blueberries, dark skinned fruits. Maybe you were deficient in that. So, I mean, and a lot of different reasons for it, but it works.
And the way I kind of like, let's say my logic brain comes in, right? This happens at this occurred at a, let's say, intuitional level. But my scientist brain that I've been training for, what would it be? My entire life, right? That's what we're training through high school. That's what we train through college. It starts trying to come in here, and it's like, okay, well, what the hell is happening? And the way I've kind of broken it down, right, is, the color spectrum is let's say this, the light spectrum, the colors that we can see on the light spectrum, is just a sliver, right? It's like, if you look at the light spectrum, it's smaller than the edge of a coin. And so what I kind of like have rationalized, let's say, is, well, we can see the color red, we can see the color orange, yellow, blue, violet, or indigo. I don't think it's exactly purple, but regardless, it's like, those are really only colors you can kind of see for the most part. Anything in between all of those. And I guess you can add black, but that's kind of just the absent of light, and then white, which is, and so the way I've broken it down is like, shit, like, why would we have evolved in such a way that we can only see those colors? Like, why are only those colors beneficial to us? And I think what's been documented, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it was linked to fruit and being able to see if it's ripe and being able to see if it's like ready to eat. And so therefore, it stands without reason that, fruits and even vegetables, it's like, well, those are really the only colors that they are. And if, there are no fruits, I guess, in existence, or we don't really have any that are outside of that color spectrum. And I guess if there were, we wouldn't be able to see them because we wouldn't need to use them. Right.
Yeah, no.
And so I guess, yeah.
I think you're spot on with that. And adaptation, or let's talk about evolution. Over time, you got tons of different. Well, it used to be on this planet there were tons of different species sharing, little areas, and therefore you needed a niche. You needed to eat something that not everybody else was eating, especially if you were a human who were, physically relatively weak compared to all other life forms on the planet. And we also had to eat a lot of stuff that couldn't eat us, because aside from a lot of popular beliefs, we're not these master hunters. Helicopters and long-range weapons and missiles, that makes us master hunters, but we were not always master hunters, right? So we had to, most of it was foraging, right? Hunter-gatherers. Most of it was gathering. Hunters came back sometimes with food, a lot of times with dead animals that were already dead, or people, or Neanderthals, or whatever was available. And the rest of it was gathering. That was the majority of our diet. And all species have a limited amount of energy that can be put to different types of functional reserves. Vision being one of them, smell, hearing, all the other stuff. And over the course of evolutionary time, it starts to pare down, right? There's a finite amount of energy. So where are you going to put it to? Humans can eat most of the stuff in that color spectrum. They don't need infrared because we're not eating things based on that. We're eating things based on the nutrients bioavailable at the skin level, at the surface level, which tells us more about what's inside. It's intuitive, right? So, I mean, you're totally right about that. It's mostly things that grow out of the ground because those are the things that have most of the colors. Otherwise, animals tend to be crypto. They are camouflaged in whatever areas they live in. That's not a color scheme. That's a pattern. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah, and there's a whole document, or I guess like a animal show, because it's a documentary, nature documentary on Netflix called Life in Color. And it's all about how, other animals, specifically like insects, birds, I mean, I guess all of them really, tigers, deer, how they've evolved, seeing different colors. Like they don't, or not even seeing colors, but seeing different forms of the light spectrum, and how that helps them with predators. Like they would show like a extremely, I don't want to call it ugly, but a butterfly that, didn't appear to have a lot of color on it. But then when you view it underneath a UV light, it's like this most beautiful, like radiant, like thing. And it's like, well, like, why does it matter to us kind of thing that it looks that way? It's like, well, it doesn't matter to you because it didn't evolve for you to like appreciate its beauty. I know like the same thing is true with like lions. It's like, if you, it's like we can see lions like a mile away almost, like the yellow and the black, right? And so it's like, and we could stand to reason like, why are deer so stupid to not see that lion so far away? But in reality, deer are, I guess it would be red, green colorblind, or they're one of the color blinds, green, blue,
I forget which one, but yeah.
Yeah, one of the color blinds where orange and green isn't very easily seen. So the stripes on the lion actually looks like blades of grass kind of like shaking back and forth. And it's not, to the deer, the gazelle, it's not, which is crazy, right? It's like, if they were evolving, they should have evolved better eyesight, in order to see these tigers like kind of approaching them, on the savannah. But
yeah, I mean, but also, because we're humans, we tend to think in the things that we understand, right? But in terms of smell, so they're light years ahead of us in smell, and not only in smell, but their reaction time. The reaction time, their, what is it called? The motor. I forget the official thing. Basically, the time between the sensing of a threat and the movement away from the threat. There's a specific word for that. In them, basically, it's like we are 1,000 times slower. They also, in one bound, can leap 30 feet. We, in one bound, can leap, maybe, if we're really prepped for it, 5 feet. Not going to do much when each stride of a lion is about 10. And when they're fully charging. So, they're going to rely on different things. They're going to rely on smell. They're going to rely on hearing. And they're going to be very secure in the fact that, oh, look at that fat lion. Come on. Yeah, I'm just going to keep eating until you get like within 2 feet, and then I'm going to jump. And you will never get anywhere. Yeah. So, there's all those different adaptations. I don't know how we got into that one. Sorry.
We were talking about the color spectrum.
Color spectrum. Yes, their color spectrum goes to a whole different level, and they're, like sharks and everything else. Like a lot of animals see in electric color fields, not magnetic. The word's failing me right now. But they literally see electricity, or they see different types of infrared, or you can smell. How do they put it? You can smell electric currents in different frequencies of electric current. So you don't have to use the eyes for the same thing. It's really fascinating. You can use pretty much any sensory organ and tune it to whatever you need, which is the really interesting thing about evolution in life. Speaking to that, as a scientist geek.
Yeah. Well, but there's like truth to that too. Like that there's, these electric, let's say, fields all around us. One, you could argue like your phone or the television or internet or Wi-Fi, like those are electric currents for sure. But there has to be an electric, and maybe we're going to start losing people here, but there's got to be like an electric. I don't know though. At this point, I've kind of gone down these spiritual rabbit holes far enough that people should be ready for anything.
Right,
Because take natural disasters for instance. You can predict them by the animals that you have. Like if animals start freaking out, if animals start trying to get to higher ground, it's like a day or two before that these things occur that they like already know, like, hey, something's about to happen, we need to get the fuck out of here, like shit's about to go down.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, they're tuned to that obviously through that species and through the millennium and hundreds of thousands, millions of years they've been around. They've come to know that earthquakes are probably bad. It creates this kind of environment where my predators can then take precedence, and I'm going to have a harder time surviving. So let's get the hell out of here, right? So you're going to be finally tuned to that. What is it with humans? Storms. We are notoriously, again, not to be mean to ourselves, but we're notoriously and comparatively weak creatures. We're not covered in thick fur, all this other stuff. Storms. Most humans are really terrified of storms. If you grew up in the north and that stuff, you get used to it. But still, you're going to go out and, play in a storm naked? Most of the time, probably not, right? So we have these really amazing ways that we sense the electromagnetic variations in weather pattern changes. We're very sensitive to weather because it affects us a lot harder than other creatures. There's so many examples. You can go so far. And actually, circling back to martial arts or chiropractic, that sensitivity, like, when you touch somebody, like in BJJ, you put in a force because, you're either going to get something out of it or they're going to react that you can then react to and counter. Right? That's a sensitivity. Yeah. You can feel it even before they're going to do it. Sometimes when you're so good, you can hear them thinking about it. You're like, oh, come on in. Wow, thank you. That was a gift. We'll take the gift. And so we still use it. We don't use it in every aspect of our lives. It's not such a macro thing that all humans share anymore. But when you master something, I think you still get to use and do that real-time adaptation and evolutionary, or what they call epigenetic changes, where you can literally fine-tune your sensory or physiological, processes based on need.
Yeah. Which is crazy in its own right? Like, I think where this conversation goes from here is the next step is like, well, if like the way I'm starting to view like science and technology almost is that we're trying to use machines to replace like our internal instincts of kind of sorts.
Amen.
And this really kind of hit me whenever I was like, I remember thinking I'll never get a chip put in me. Like that was a big thing that was going around, like to get chips in you, get chips in your arm. I remember in Ohio, there was like a thing where they were going to mandate that at the company, if you wanted to work there, you had to get a chip in your arm. And, in my mind, I was like, that's crazy. I'll never do that. And then I caught myself. I was like, well, the one way I would do that was if I could get a little LED screen on the inside of my arm. And it just said like how many like carbs or fat or protein I had to eat in order to like sustain this thing.
It's tempting.
Well, oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's easy. Yeah. It's easier than the alternative. And so I had that thought, right? And then I think about a year, maybe 2 years later, I came across a book called Intuitive Eating, and all about listening to your body, listening to what you should eat. Should you eat this? Should you eat that? How did this make you feel? Did this make you feel stronger? Did this make you feel weaker? What type of dieter are you? And throughout reading that book, it hit me. It was like, holy shit. Like that was when I had this whole like, oh my gosh, we're using science and technology to try to replace our intuition. Like it's almost like we don't want to be responsible, or we don't want to, maybe I don't want to say that we don't want to, but like there's this desire to not be in tune with the intuition and to hand it over almost to a machine to tell us.
I think you were right when you said that we don't want to be responsible. If we're not responsible, it's not our fault. If it's not our fault, then, it wasn't my decision. It just happened. I had no control over it. It's an easy way to live. It's laziness. All creatures will choose the nice soft bed versus the hard climb up the mountain in the middle of the night, right? I mean, unless you're jacked up on something or you're absolutely nuts, that's just the obvious choice. All life will do that. And it just, I'm going to say, unfortunately, gotten to a point where technology has taken over, so many things. It's no longer just convenience. It's now a replacement, and I think it lessens us as a species, as individuals, as cultures.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, yeah, yeah.
A huge parallel that I see, and I'm experiencing this now, right? Because um, I quit my job 3 months ago now. I think
Mm-hmm.
3 months ago, and haven't really had a source of income since then.
Mm-hmm.
I have savings and whatnot, but I always catch myself with these flashes of like anxiety or lack of confidence that I'm going to be able to make it without a job,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so crazy being in this parallel because I have always seen kind of the quote that's like a salary is a salary is like the drug they give you to keep you content or something like that. It's like it keeps you from like really growing and becoming more. It's like, and another corollary I'm seeing with this is I've seen a lot of people my own age. I'm 27 and now I got a software engineering degree. Or a computer engineering degree. I went and worked as a software engineer, and now I quit my job and I'm living in Brazil. And so many people like on this journey, especially in the last like month, whenever I was like making all these changes,
Mm-hmm.
people my own age are like, this is the time to do it. And with me, it's always hit me weird. It's like I understand, I guess, older people telling me that this is the time to do it, but somebody my own age, it kind of just hits a little different.
Yeah.
It's like,
You guys are sharing the
yeah.
experience.
What's
You
that?
guys are sharing the same experience in real time. It's not like, me looking back like, oh yeah, no, do it now because when you're older, it won't be as easy. No,
Right.
people your age obviously are feeling what you're feeling. Right.
Right. Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah, because, and I guess the way I'm trying to warp this back to our parallel where we were talking about, like the easy and comfortability.
Mm-hmm.
Because by no means, don't get me wrong, by no means was this an easy decision. And on my third night here, like I got hit with, I think I texted you this. It was like a lot of anxiety of like,
Yeah.
did I make the right decision? It's like, I love San Diego. San Diego was dope. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, da da da. You get wrapped up in these head games.
Right.
and so then, I guess it's like, where was I going with this? It's like, I can always fall back on a software engineering position. Like I get blown up all the time for software engineering isn't going anywhere.
Right.
And it's like, where am I trying to go with this? I'm trying to bring it back to
responsibility, laziness.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because I guess there's a sense of like, well, I kind of wanted to tie it back, I guess, to how like the salary is the drug that keeps us comfortable almost. It's like, I guess there's a lot of ways to go with this, right? Like there's a mixture of, it's easy and comfortable. So why not just stick with the salary, stick to the status quo?
Mm-hmm.
And here's where I may be going with this is I guess I'm probably at a point in my life where I'm like in that in-between stage of like, well, do I go and try and do this like for real and kind of like, and I guess I kind of am with the podcast, but like start my own thing mixed with, well, it was pretty just simple and easy to just be back in San Diego, party every weekend and just work the 9 to 5, but it's like, there's that level of like, but there's more to live out there. And so it's like that weird mix of that in between of like, what do you go for mixing with, the comfortable and the safe. And I think that's where we kind of were coming from is like, I guess maybe it's one of those things that's just not for everybody. Maybe I'm making it too personal, so I'm getting caught up in my head about it.
I mean, that's pretty much our only filters that we can all come from, right? That's how we make it personal. But I mean, speaking to that and like, do I do comfortable or and safe or do I go take those things and when do I do it? Well, why do you have to do it at a specific time? Why do you have to do it when you're 25? Why can't you do it when you're 65? Why do you have to do things in that order versus that order? This is great that you're doing this. I told you before, man, I'm impressed. I'm inspired. I'm proud of you. Just all these cool. I was like, man, right on. Go get it because you don't know what you want until you know what you don't want. And if you're a person interested in the world, you got to go see a lot of things you don't want. I have traveled the world. I have done tons of different careers. One of the reasons I'm a chiropractor is because I'm a horrible employee. I do not take
Right.
orders well. I don't believe what you believe. I think I can do it better, or I just don't like what you do. You know what I mean? Or whatever it is, right? And I've done
Right.
a lot of different things. I've traveled all over the places, all over the world for many different reasons. I've done lots of different, studies, and um, even my family life and my personal life isn't the normal trajectory. And I would never have it any other way because I don't fall into that model. And you're right. It is based on the individual and what you're comfortable with. But sometimes some people are comfortable with the struggle. Some people are comfortable with the challenge. Some people are comfortable with pushing the boundaries, right? That's why we have, you know, these people flying up in space, or, the big business people, or the people that, change spirituality and whatever it is, right? I mean, that's why you have it. So even trying to put that into some sort of box of understanding and logic, I think uh, detracts from the enormity and the positivity that it is. Just do what you're supposed to do at that time. When you'll probably settle down is when you have a wife, kids, or something that's alive that you're responsible for. That's when you
Sure.
should do it, because that's the right thing to do. You've taken responsibility for another
Responsible.
life. Or maybe you can still travel the world because you figured out a way to continue and then give that to somebody instead of, the same neighborhood their whole life. Who knows?
I mean, yeah, that's interesting you point that out, because that's something I've also thought about is like, even people with like kids, it's like, well, I've always kind of questioned like, well, why can't you travel with them? Like, why can't you still kind of do it? And I don't have a kid, so I am not in any place to make that kind of judgment, or even, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess I can
You,
still
you,
think
you can
about it,
have your
but
opinions for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
But I'm sure it comes with its own level of like extra worry. You have to now think about this kid on top of everything else.
yeah. And again, it's any life that you take responsibility for. A good person is defined on how they give back to the world around them, right? That's really what it is.
Yeah.
And, if you take responsibility for a life, it is your responsibility until that life is no longer there, or they can do it for themselves. Those are your only two ways
Right.
out. And other than that, you're not doing a good job in this world. So you got to, rethink your
Right.
values. But, I've, playing in music and being around celebrities, and my wife working in Hollywood and all that kind of stuff for many years. I've been around many billionaires, many celebrities. The majority of them do not live a regular life where their kids grow up in the same place. I think also because they just can't, because paparazzi and media is freaking
Mm-hmm.
insane. And people trying to come at you for something is insane. But I see these kids grow up, and, I've seen a lot of them grow up I've seen them born, and now they're young adults. And they've had these amazing life experiences. They're centered, they're calm, they've seen the world. They've done so much that they already know what they don't want to do. Right.
Right.
And it makes it so much easier to be like, oh, I do love this. I keep coming back to this, or, whatever it is. And, I know if you have the resources, you can do it however you want. And
Mm-hmm.
the rest is just, your comfort level on where you fit into other people's expectations or other society's expectations.
And I think you really hit on. You said it twice now, and I wanted to make a point the first time, but you said it again, where you kind of figure out what you. And I think your story is a perfect example of it. It's like you figure out what you want to do by doing so many things that you don't want to do,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I mean, coming from a story of like being a ninja to being a samurai to, doing martial arts to joining a band to, going to school for medicine, not wanting to do medicine, and then realizing that you want to be a chiropractor. It's like that, like, you weren't until it's weird. I had my dad on, and he was at the age of like 6 when he figured out he knew what he wanted to do. But,
Wow.
your story, yeah, which is
I'm always impressed by
crazy
that.
story.
Yeah.
You have to check out it. It's episode 5, I
I
believe.
will do that. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's so wild to hear both of these kind of stories, because yours wasn't until you were 26 where
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh shit, here's my calling. Like, here's how I'm able to kind of give back to people. Here's how I'm able to figure it out. And well, I mean, what is figuring it out? But, uh, it's that search for like what you want to do. And it's, trying so many different things. I feel like that's kind of where we almost get robbed of it. We don't get that information when we're younger. And I don't know if it's in like an American thing, but like we're not really I mean, sure, in the education system, you're taught English, you're taught like social studies, you're taught math, you're taught science, you're taught all those different things, but you're not really like you're learning about them, but it like learning about something is completely different than actually like doing it every single day for 8 hours a day for 5 days a week, which is crazy in its own right. But, I guess I find that really fascinating too, right? Is like that idea of, you got to do a bunch of different things to be able to figure out what you don't want to do in order to figure out what you do want to do. Because even you could translate that to my, I'm just saying shit, stop me whenever I'm wrong.
No, man. There is no wrong. I'm just listening. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I even find it fascinating with like Brazil right now. It's like, I've met a couple people now. And so like, I'm hanging out with some people after I finish this recording and, we're going to go out, but it's like, it's so wild because for the last, let's say 2.5, 3 years, I've been wanting to live in Brazil, be able to live and be wherever I want and do whatever I want. Yet now that this has happened, there's like that feeling of shit. When I had that anxiety hit, it's like, shit, that I like, be careful what you wish for. Like, cause you get it. It's like, all right, well, like, was this actually what I wanted to do now? It's like, well, shit. Like I'm here for 2 months. I'm committed for 2 months, but and I like traveling and it's like, like what it's like still trying to I'm still bouncing around with it all, if that makes sense. It's like, what, I guess I'm still trying to make sense of the world and where I want to kind of put my foot in and, figure that stuff out. And I think it's I don't really know where I'm going with this tangent here, but it's a fascinating adventure, I guess, at that point. It's a fascinating piece of the human experience.
It is, I think, a human condition, and it is something everybody should go through. And there's two things I have learned from all my travels and living different lives and doing tons of different things. Wherever you go, there you are. So you can go wherever you want. You're just putting a new face on the same person, right? You still bring your baggage, your anxieties, your fears, your wants, your hopes, your dreams, your passions, your skills there. And wherever you go, people are people. They're the exact same people with the exact differences of opinion, the exact types of opinion. It's just filtered through a different language and maybe a different cultural filter. Otherwise, you're going to go, it's, I forget when I realized, I think I was like 42. 42. Where were we? And we were coming back from Guadalajara. We've been down there for a bit and came back and we had this whirlwind bunch of trips and going and seeing music all over the world. And I had that realization. I got home like, oh my God, everywhere I go, people are exactly the same thing. If I want lawyers who are, into veganism and like heavy metal, I'll find them in Mexico. I'll find them in Guam. I'll find them in Siberia. I'll find them. Whatever I want, I go there and I get it. So it's interesting. So then it just becomes a function of what's the background you want behind you. You want mountains, you want lake, you want storms, you want heat, whatever you want, that's where you go, right? So, and as you journey more, you'll find it too. You'll get to know that wherever you are, you're still there. So that place ain't going to change it. And wherever you go, there's still people. So what kind of tribe do you want? And just where do you want that tribe? And what language do you like, maybe, right? Maybe that's an important one for you. So
yeah. No, that's actually a really fascinating way to put it. And I think I've had inklings of this because I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, PA. I went to college in Orlando, Florida, and then I lived out in San Diego for 4 years after college, and now I'm in Brazil. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's like what is it? Like you receive what you are kind of thing. Like you get what you are, you receive what you put out into this world. And so, whether you're in Pittsburgh, whether you're in Orlando, whether you're in San Diego, you're going to be receiving, what you're putting out into the world. And it's like, and I feel like that's what's happening again now that it's in Brazil. And so I guess, almost to your point, it's like, it's like you travel to kind of find yourself, I guess, is like what people say. But I mean, in actuality, it's almost like, you're traveling just to find the backdrop of what you want for your life to be.
Yeah, I think that's the eventual realization, because, you're already found. If you don't like something about yourself, you got to change it wherever you are. You got to put in the work and the effort, unless they got the chip.
Right.
And at this point, I might use a chip. I don't know. I'm kidding. But
Depends on it.
yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, my power is getting low. I'm gonna go grab a cord. Is that all right?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Are we time?
Well, we are on time. Well, we can see what happens. How much time do you have?
Actually, I should check it. Hold on.
Yeah. I'm trying.
Oh, okay. I actually have to get to a meeting in a few minutes. What time is it?
Oh, okay.
45. Wow, we've been going for an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah. Time flies in this thing, right?
Yeah, man, that's cool. Right on. Wow.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
All right, cool. Well, we can wrap it up, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sweet. Anything? Damn. Yeah. I mean, now I feel like I have a lot to think about after this.
You're welcome. Hey, if you want, we could totally do a round 2.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we'll let me let some of this sink in, and then we can bring you back on and do this again. Cause
absolutely, whatever you need.
I mean, this is the first one that's like got me thinking a little bit. Yeah, a little lost for words at this point now.
Right, and you know what, man? I do know. I know I could be a lot, and I'll just go and go. Feel free, like I said, or like you said, anytime you need to cut me out, you just stop it right there.
Yeah. No, I love it, man. I love it. No, I mean, this is still going to be put out there, all this stuff that we're saying now. But yeah, no, I love the conversation. I mean, if you got to go, let's kind of wrap it up with like closing remarks. Is there anything you want to, get out to people, anything you want to, cause I'll ask you for some links to put down in the description below, but, if you're in San Diego, go check them out. If you've never checked out Chiropractic, go check out Dr. Reuben.
Right on.
But other than that, I mean, is there anything you want to plug? Anything you want to encourage people to do?
You know what? I just got one thing. I don't want to plug anything. I mean, I just want to encourage people to just be better. Be better than you were the day before. Every day, be better. And, if everybody does that every day, eventually everybody will just make a better world. You know what I mean? Put out the love, be a better person, and try to let others 1% do the same.
Every day.
Yeah, exactly. 1% every day. So that's it. Just be better.
Cool. I love it. Well, thank you, Dr. Reuben, for coming on.
Absolute
pleasure.
Check him
out in San Diego. He doesn't want to plug himself, but I mean, my neck's done, a lot better since seeing him.
Right out, man.
Been training. I do need to find someone, so I need to hit you up about
hit me up.
Finding someone in Brazil.
Hit me up. We'll work it.
Hell yeah, I love it. Other than that, thank you guys for listening to the end of this. If we said something today, if it angered you, definitely meditate on it, figure out why before sending me a 10-paragraph essay about why I'm wrong. I will not read it. It will be a waste of your time, and I will tell you to meditate, and we can talk about it after. Other than that, share this stuff with if you got friends, family, whatnot. If you've had this conversations before, share it with them. I'd love it. And other than that, let's keep growing together.
Amen to that, brother.